Let's move around the world a little bit. Other places that you've explored. Japan, as you mentioned to me when we were talking beforehand, Japan before the earthquake was the scenario that your author wrote about.
Yes.
But how do you see things now, and how does the earthquake affect it?
Well, the earthquake has already led to a 15% decline in industrial production in the month of March, a decline in exports. So we will have negative growth in Japan in the second quarter. But once they can solve these power problems, which have been constraining output here in the last few weeks, and once the auto and electronic companies can work out their supply problems with components and intermediate goods, then we should have growth back on track again by the third quarter. Then the fourth quarter, we'll get the benefit of reconstruction spending. So after minus 2% growth or more in the second quarter, I could see growth in the fourth quarter back in the 3 and 4% range because of reconstruction activity.
And what about the politics in Japan? It's always opaque, but you've been a student of it for many years.
Well, we've got a very good chapter on politics by Richard Katz, who describes all the problems the Democratic Party was facing back in January and February, when it was not clear that Prime Minister Khan could even survive 4 or 5 more months. Now, because of the earthquake, Khan may survive for longer. But there's no doubt he's very unpopular, and the LDP is saying is one of the conditions for cooperation on the reconstruction program, they would like him to resign. So I'd say his future is still somewhat uncertain. Meanwhile, the Democrats clearly have lost the halo image they had with their victory a year and a half ago, and therefore I would say Japanese politics right now is really kind of got a vacuum. There is no dominant party. If we had an election right now, it's hard to say who would win. There's some new small parties coming on strong, but they would be winning 20, 30 seats in the Diet, not in the hundreds. So you might get a very divided chamber having to once again resort to some kind of coalition. The question is, how would the coalition be structured?
And elsewhere in Asia, you have very strong chapters on China. What do you reveal there?
We've got a discussion of how China now faces a labor shortage, which will create the possibility of a squeeze on corporate profit margins, a squeeze on China's competitive position, and that this will be a constraint on Chinese growth over the next 2 or 3 years. In addition, China's inflation rate now is well above 5%, which is leading to a tighter monetary policy. There's no doubt right now the priority of Chinese policymakers at the central government level is very much to try and control inflation. At the local government level, of course, we still have lots of officials who are fighting for more infrastructure spending. In fact, if you look at all the provinces, their projected growth rates in the year ahead, or the next 2 or 3 years, are well above the growth rates talked about by the national leaders. So there still is tension in the system, but there's no doubt right now the central government policymakers are very focused on inflation.